Everyone, and welcome back to Gearheads, the Simracing podcast. I'm host Ving, and today I will bring you Mark, the owner and CEO from MVH Studio in UK. MVH Studio probably are very famous already for their mods on the Logitech, but keep an eye because the Series 2 wheel is coming and will change a lot of things. Series 2 is compatible with Logitech, Fanatec, Trustmaster, Monza, and 4 more, so keep an eye on what they're doing. And of course, let's jump with our guest. We have here Mark, the owner of MVH Studio based in UK. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having
me. Mark, can you tell me a little bit about your background and how you involved in create sim racing wheels and all this sim racing hardware?
Yeah, so I've been into computers since early childhood, and I was playing on the Commodore 64 Need for Speed, to give you an idea how far back it goes. And I remember when Logitech brought out the first force feedback wheel. It was a red-rimmed wheel, I think it was, with pedals. Of course I bought that, and it absolutely put you in the seat, which, if you look at it back now, is laughable compared to where we are now, right? But that's definitely there from the beginning. And I have a career of engineering, so it's something I've been doing professionally for a long time. And it was a couple of years before, well, just about a year or so, half a year before the outbreak, a year before the outbreak of the COVID pandemic. I had finished an engineering project for a defense contractor, and I had some time off. And so I was playing my old favorite, Gran Turismo, and that was Gran Turismo Sport back in those days. And I think it just came out. It was on the market just maybe a year before COVID. I don't remember. And the place I was living in and working in at that time, or finished working, was Greece, on an island in Greece called Lefkada. And I had some free time, so I played. And of course, the thing you would get to play on your PlayStation was a Logitech wheel. It wasn't by choice, or that was what I could get my hands on back there. And so I got a G29, and I was racing with it and enjoyed it very much. And I played Gran Turismo on the original PlayStation as well. So again, this is all stuff that I've always been doing. But I realized during that time that that wheel, it's a great, for what it is and for what you pay for. Great bang for your buck. It's available everywhere. It's very hard to break. I mean, it's durable. Logitech has a very good warranty, but it's not perfect by any means. And the first thing that I personally didn't like was that they changed it on the 923, but on the 29, where you put your thumbs into the wheel, the stitching there is very rough. And over time, because I like to have my thumb inside on that middle spoke, and over time, that area here around the thumb got really, really red and irritated. And I was looking at it and I thought, well, it is very durable, very hard, but it's too hard. And the stitching felt just too rough. And that's when kind of the idea spawned, look, I can do a better wheel than that. And as I said, my background is engineering, prototyping various stuff for projects, nothing new. I had 3D printers at home anyway. So this is all, I work with CNC machines in my professional life. So then as a hobby project, I just designed an open wheel. And because I wasn't very good back in those days doing any kind of ergonomic shaping, which is very different. When you work in CAD as an engineer, you work off sketches, and it's not a what do you call it? A biological shape, right? It's not a round shape. You have all very geometric shapes. So it's a very different way of working. So in the beginning, I didn't know how to make really nice grips in CAD. And so I went to Thingiverse like everyone else. I had a look around and I found someone who actually shaped open-shaped grips for something completely different. And I contacted the guy. This is, many years ago. And I contacted him directly and said, hey, is it okay if I use your grips for my own projects? And he said, yeah, absolutely fine. Go ahead. I'm happy. That wasn't his job or anything. He did it like most people on Thingiverse. You design something and put it up there.
Mhm.
And then I made the Open GT wheel, the first MVH wheel. And I put that on, I think I posted it on Reddit or on some racing groups. And people were flipping out. They're like, oh my God, you can do this. And I said, oh, yeah. And I told everyone, you need a 3D printer. Here's the files. And then people kept asking me, hey, can you make this for me? And that was really it. I said, okay, I'll make 1, 2. And before you knew it, I saw that there was a massive demand because just before COVID, that at least was my impression, sim racing started to take off even more than before. And I think to a great degree, this is dependent on Gran Turismo Sport becoming such a massive hit. Right? It went because of the multiplayer element in it, right? And I said at the same time, Assetto Corsa, for example, hasn't died. It's still around. How old is Assetto Corsa now? And that says a lot. And if you think
But of
about
course,
the
probably
reshaders and all,
say 10, 10 years, I would say already.
yeah. And then it's still alive. And if you put reshade on it and all the other plugins, it looks like a brand new game. It's photorealistic at this point. So it was just the right time for this kind of a thing. And when I started looking online a bit, I wasn't the only one who came up with ideas to mod the Logitech wheelbase. Because if you look at the Logitech G27, I think, and then before that was a GT Force, they're all basically the exact same thing. And you have them spread everywhere, in every corner of the planet, because Logitech has such a big reach. And so I thought, well, if I make this, this is something people will have done before me. And of course, other people have taken the wheel off. They put on a big wheel because they wanted to do drifting, paddle extensions because it's a bigger rim wheel and so on. All of these things came with drawbacks. And this is something I personally was always very keen on not doing. So, for example, putting a big, heavy aftermarket wheel on a Logitech wheelbase that has 2.3 Newton meters of torque, that's not going to work. There's hardly any power in the wheel. What's more, because it's so heavy, and you're overloading that plastic bearing where the actual main, the plastic housing for the bearing is, it cracks. There's a lot of things that you cannot go beyond the physical limitation of it because it was never designed for that. But certain things in there are really good considering what people have done with it. The pedals, if you look at the pedals, for example, they're really well designed. Yes, potentiometers are shit. Am I allowed to swear?
No, it's okay. I had one, and I think where Logitech lost and still losing a little bit is on the pedals, because like you say, on any Logitech product is, if you're comparing on the time, I'm comparing with the Nokia.
Yeah, line's breaking up. Okay, I got you back.
I'll say.
So anyway,
that's all right. I will say that I compare the Logitech the outside, the robustious as a tank, and I compare it to the Nokia 3310. If you remember Nokia 3310, exactly. You can throw away ever you can make whatever you want, and it's so well designed, robustic. And I think the Logitech is the same thing. You have people that have for 8-9 years, and they're still doing. The pedals, no. The pedals is where I think they, like you say, is where they lose. I think the pedals are, like you say, they are very well designed. You can do a lot of things, but they are quite weak.
Yeah. Well, the base, we all know that if you did any sim racing, you know that positional braking is not easy to learn. It's very difficult. And if there's no feedback on it, it's even more difficult. By positional, I mean that instead of feeling a brake pressure and saying, this is how much pressure I apply to get just to the point of locking up or enabling ABS, this versus actually measuring the distance. Because we humans have, it's very easy with your closed eyes to apply pressure on with your foot roughly the same time, same amount for 10 times in a row, versus trying to put your foot in the same position roughly in the same position 10 times in a row. You will find it extremely difficult, whereas applying pressure is something that is very intuitive for us. So that's the reason why everyone uses load cells, because a load cell measures the strength, the pressure with which you're pressing the pedal, not the travel. And that's also the biggest flaw with potentiometers or brake pedals based on potentiometers. The throttle, the clutch, none of that matters. All that can work on potentiometer fine, but the brake pedal, that's where you win and lose races, because at the end of the day, if you can't trail brake, you're losing time going into the turn and going out of the turn. And that's where a race is won. It's not in a straight line, especially in sim racing. So those things needed improving. And that was the first thing I did. I've started looking at that after doing the steering wheel. And there was a guy on the internet, on YouTube, this is decades ago, who on his kitchen table was etching the PCB for an amplifier in order to use a load cell on a Logitech pedal. And he was a DIYer, but also an engineer, did this as a side thing and put it on YouTube. And I was looking at it going, oh yeah, of course. I mean, I understand what he's doing here. We should try and make this ourselves. You know, when you etching a PCB is not something you can do like hundreds of units a week. You have to do it by hand. It's quite difficult. And so I contacted him. And, you know, fast forward, he now works together with me. MVH Studios in Budapest, that's our second studio, is run by him and Martin and Dexter. Those are my two main engineers there. And he basically developed the load cell mod. I just came up with, okay, we need to package it in such a way that it can be done quite easily, that it doesn't require any soldering, that it can be reversed in terms of warranty claims, issues like that, because all of our products are meant to be mods that you can immediately, if you want, take off again and reverse to the exact original state. So let's say you want to sell it on to someone, or you have a warranty claim with Logitech. Well, you know, you haven't drilled a hole, you haven't soldered anything, you can claim the warranty technically. I mean, legally, that's probably a loophole, because Logitech will say, well, if you opened the device, then a warranty would be void. But in order for that to take effect, they would have to be able to prove that you opened the device. And if you haven't made any irreversible changes on it, yeah, that's kind of, you know, up there. But that was the secondary goal. The primary goal was to enable mods for everyone. I saw from the get-go when I started sim racing that the one thing you can see clearly in sim racing is there's a huge discrepancy. And keep in mind, this was before COVID, between strong force feedback wheels, and I'm talking about the motors, the wheelbases like SimuCube, Fanatec, all of those big ones, and then entry level like Thrustmaster, Logitech, and so on. This was before Logitech brought out the DD Pro and all that. So the delta, the price delta, is massive, which always indicates, and as you can tell, I have a business background here as well. If there is a big delta between top end and low end, well, there's a lot of space for something in between. And this is where I then started to see an opportunity, and that's how Martin, my Hungarian engineer who developed the load cell on his kitchen table, we then came together and said, okay, let's do this professionally. And then the load cell happened, and after that we worked on the telemetry screen and so on. And the telemetry, for example, is also working together with a genius programmer called Dexter. He's also in the Hungarian department. This guy, I throw anything at him and he goes, let me think about it. A couple of days later, it works. So one of the ideas that I had when we were looking beyond what we had already was, how can we develop a screen, a telemetry screen that works on every platform, everywhere? And it wasn't just a screen that you plug into the HDMI port of your PC, because everyone can do that. That wasn't a challenge by any means. And I was already doing a lot of robotics and work with ESP32 chipsets, which are Wi-Fi chipsets, which you can program and use Arduino code in the background and whatnot. So then I came down to my boys in Hungary and we said, look, I'd like to develop something that, as a backend, we develop our own electronics in PCB and software, has an ESP32, uses the UDP stream, telemetry stream from all the games to connect and get the telemetry data, and then displays it. And because most games now have a UDP out, even the console games have UDP out, this will be cross-compatible on Xbox, PlayStation, PC, and is standalone. Because before we came out with this, there was a solution to do this. You use a PC in the loop. So you use a regular HDMI out display, one of those Volcore LCDs or anything that runs through SimHub. But then you have to have a PC that runs SimHub, and that PC then takes the UDP from your console. But who in his right mind is going to turn on the console, turn on the PC, turn on the telemetry, and then go racing in Gran Turismo? It's like nobody. So I wanted a plug and make it work system. So it just works. That was the plan. And so this is how we develop these things. And when we saw that there was a market for this, again, because cost is also an issue, telemetry screens are usually very expensive and they're PC only. And we thought, well, we can do this cheaper. And we came up with
the only one that I know that exists and is not a full telemetry is from Trustmasters, and it's just a display, a LED display. There is a LED display where you have the gears and the speed and the RPMs. That's it. And I think the price is around 80 pounds or 70 pounds, while yours is for 105 pounds. You have one, and from what I read, is on the carbon fiber. So you have a TK12 carbon fiber plate included.
Yeah.
It's compatible with a lot of games, so the games compatible list is huge. You can use plugins from SimHub, so it's a win. And in terms of the mount, how you have different mounts for every type of wheel, or you have to mount it on your sim rig?
So at the moment because it still needs power, right? So we ship it with a coiled USB USB-C cable, which you can plug into any hub or anything, or at the back of your if you're not using a Logitech, you can, wherever you get a USB 5-volt power outlet, or even a power bank. Some people just plug it into battery power banks. Except for that cable, it's wireless, right? But because of that cable, putting it onto the actual wheel, well, it depends. If you're doing an F1 race, you don't do more than a 90-degree turn, then it's not a big issue. But if you're a drifter or rally racer, you're not going to do that, because then the cable ends up winding up. And most wheels, like the Logitech Thrustmaster, do 2.5 turns each way. So you end up having the cable going around. This is not such a big issue for most people, but we decided that we didn't want to put a mount onto the Logitech wheels themselves, but instead on the motor base, because of better visibility. And while the practicality is, it's all right if it's on the wheel, but because most people sit on their desk, not everyone has a rig. I mean, yes, you do, I do, but most people sit on their desk or on something similar to a play seat, along those lines. And then if you sit not too low, but rather higher up, because it's very rare that you have people who actually have the F1 seat position, right, where your feet are up and your butt is lower. So most people sit more like a GT race car. And in that position, you actually have the wheel rim here, not here, right? And that's why we decided, well, if the rim is here, having display down here makes zero sense. You won't be looking at it much. So instead, it would be better to have it just under your line of vision. And so we decided to put mounts onto the motor mounts. So whether it's a fanatec DD-CSL or a Thrustmaster or Logitech wheelbase, or even we also have one for the Logitech DD Pro, it's all mounted on the motor.
Yeah, I can see the list that you have. You go from the Logitech G29, 923, 920, after the Pro, fanatec DD, SL, fanatec P2, SimCube, SimMagic, Moza, and Trustmaster. So you are almost on all of them. But let me jump a little bit back to the load cell. When we were speaking about the load cell is only compatible with the Logitech 920 and the 923, I presume. Is
Yeah.
you're going to start working with a new, you think your load cell is better than the Logitech load cell himself on the DD Pro?
Load cells are load cells. It's not, of course. So, in short, the most important thing for a load cell is its resolution, right? How fine is its measuring point? Once you take, and we use a 50 kilogram load cell. So in the beginning, when load cells came out, it was all like everywhere else. When they don't know what else to latch onto in order to compare technologies, you go, so what's the maximum weight it can take? Or how fast is your car? What's the acceleration? Yes, but is that really relevant? No, it's not relevant. What's relevant is how does it actually perform, right? So is 120 kilogram, 150 kilogram load cell better than a 50 kilogram load cell? Well, only if the resolution is higher, as in it can define even clearer how much pressure you apply on it, right? Everything else doesn't matter because it comes down to how you translate the pressure onto the load cell. So if you look at our load cell system, we have it looks like a triangular piece that by pressing down creates at an angle the actual pressure onto the load cell. So you're not pressing the load cell itself, it's translated onto you could call it a very simplified lever system. And because of that, the resolution actually is not directly one-to-one translated by how much you press down, right? So you can define with a 50 kilogram load cell the same amount of traveling distance and resolution as you can do with a 120 kilogram load cell. That doesn't really matter. So these things are what you're looking at. Then, of course, when you say load cell, you also have to think about the feel for the pedal. So how many springs, dampers, and combinations of those are in there, because some people will want to have a lot of travel. Some people want very little travel. So in order to make that work, you need to be able to adjust all of the zones, right? You need to adjust when does the load cell pick up, when does the load cell end, and then you need to be able to tune this to every game as well, which is why our load cell has adjustment points, right? And so you don't have any dead zones, and you can adjust it to, like my engineer Martin likes to say, for you, if you want to be stepping on a brick or a broomstick, we can do that. There's no travel. You can do it. So it's up to you how you adjust it. Is it any better than others? Well, first of all, what we make is a mod just for the Logitech pedal. Why we made this for the Logitech pedal is what, as we discussed before, the base bones of the pedal, the metal stuff, the extruded metals, the bearings, all of that is actually quite good, pretty decent. A lot of people keep using them, then the only thing that is bad and gets replaced are the potentiometers. So if you take that bad thing out of the equation, you've got actually a pretty decent pedal set. And if you want to mount it upside down, you can mount them upside down. A lot of people take them completely out of the housing. And so what do we all start off with? We start off with a Logitech pedal set, and then we upgrade to a force feedback motor like the Fanatec DDCSL or Simracing. And the idea was, hey, why not take the stuff that's good from the entry level, tune it to a point where you go, this is pretty good now, it's mid to high end, and combine it with the next upgrade you will make, which nearly everyone will go for a direct drive wheel. And then you have a relatively cheap entry point. So you can take your Logitech pedals with our load cell mod, and you plug those into Logitech. In fact, sells one of these little adapter boxes now, which allows you to combine all kinds of Logitech gear, like their shifter and the DD Pro and the pedals, and you can combine that and make it work. And so since our load cell doesn't need an extra power supply, it's not in any way tied to a G29 923, you can plug that into your PC with that adapter, or an adapter that we will be bringing out very soon. And you can make it run on any platform with anything. That's why we decided to make it. Is it any better? I don't know. I mean, does it compare with the Huskenfield? I don't know how to pronounce it. The standard sim race pedals, right? I wouldn't say they're comparable. They're two different worlds, right? At the same time, ours will run on consoles. there is no load cell that runs on PlayStation. There isn't any except, for example, Gran Turismo. Our load cell runs on Gran Turismo. And why? Because our electronics, our little amplifier board inverts the signal. So most load cells produce a particular type of signal, which if you're on a PC, you can tell, hey, now depressing is braking, letting go is not braking. You can change that. You can invert the pedal. You cannot invert pedals on Gran Turismo or on most console games. Those options aren't there. So we did that already. We basically designed it for console first and then allowing you to modify it to make it run on PC. And the same reason why we have adjustment potentiometers on our amplifier, so that obviously you can't change the dead zones or the travel in Gran Turismo as an example, or Forza or whatever, on a console. So you need to be able to do it on our mod. That's why we have those adjustment points. And we have that all explained in detail on our videos. So that's the comparison. Is it better? I don't know. I think it's better value for money.
Okay. No, that's I agree, because the price is, let me want to don't get it wrong, it's 89 pounds, I think so. Let me just reopen again the load cell here page. It's 90 pounds. From that price is more than acceptable. But I want to talk about your new baby, that is the Bosch Pro Active Edge Shifter. What you can talk me about this one, because I'm really, really keen to know about it.
So I cannot take any credit for this. This is a life's work of Martin Bakos. He's my engineer in Hungary. And when we met, he was telling me about it. This is something he's been working on years. He's a car enthusiast more than I am, and he's got his own BMW workshop. He's crazy in that regard, and so he always wanted to create that perfect stage pattern shifter, because nobody really brought anything usable. And also, a lot of these developments, when you come to make something, it's because if it is available, if there is something out there, it's usually in the unaffordium price bracket, if you know what I mean. So you either go, well, I can't pay for this. It's impossible. I don't even know if it's any good. Maybe I'm paying crazy money and it's not that good anyway. I'm pretty smart enough to engineer my own thing, and I know what I like in a device or in a product, so I'll do my own. And that's how he went at it. And that's why we also resonate a lot, because when we met first time, he didn't know me. I only knew what I saw on YouTube, and it was recommended to me through a friend. And we immediately hooked up, because we both understood the fascination between in making something better out of nothing, or taking something as a concept and then building on it, and at the same time doing it in such a way that you are also asking for a fair price for it, right? You don't overcharge, and you don't overpromise. A very important thing for everything that you see on our site, all the product description, I'm always very neutral about what we write about our products. I don't say, without being 100% sure that I'm right, that this is the only so-and-so in the world that can do that. I don't come out shouting at everyone going, this is a game changer, and then I can't deliver DD CSLs for how many years. But anyway, that aside, everybody makes mistakes. He really worked hard on making this, prototyped I don't know how many versions through it, and I think you should definitely have a chat with him directly at some point, and see what he can tell you more about it. The idea behind it was to create a shifter that didn't only do all of the stuff that it can do, from learning behaviors for the car, for changing it into the different modes from dog box to regular H pattern, having the lockout with delays, preloading the gate and all that stuff. He also wanted it to feel right. It's very easy to produce something that functionally does the trick, but then doesn't feel right. And one of the things that he in the beginning, he struggled with was to get that feel in the right way. For example, we all know when you move the gear in neutral and you move it left and right, if it's just ding ding ding, ding jumping around in the middle, or it makes a hollow noise, that's horrible. You know, no real car sounds or feels like that. When you put it into gear, you don't want to hear a hollow plastic box going clock. Yeah, you want to hear a really satisfying chink, as if the gears actually
a hollow feeling, as you have on a Trustmaster. Trustmaster, they are cheap, they are okay, but they have a hollow feeling. You don't have some. You just know that you put the gear because the gear go inside of that corner and it touch on the metal plastic, and you know, okay, I put. But you don't have any engine feel exactly.
Exactly. And let's face it, it's by no means do you need this shifter. It's not something you have. I'm not even going to try to convince anyone you need to buy this. No. This is something you have to only buy if you want to increase and enhance realism. If you want to get as close as possible to the feeling of a real gearbox that is connected to the revs of your engine, that doesn't allow you to strip the gears and go, oh, whatever, fourth gear, bam, you know, whenever you feel like it, or, oh, I'm into first gear while your revs are at 6,000. You know, that kind of stuff takes you out of realism. And sim racing, for some people, is not about getting a number one podium, number two podium. For some people, and I'm one of those, I'm not a good racer, I'll admit it, I'm shit. There's no way I can compare to a lot of guys out there, including my own engineers. But I enjoy the realism. I like to feel how it is to race in a car, and
that
this
immersion
is what it's the immersion. This is also why I am adamant about VR racing. I race in VR. I don't want to use triples. I don't want to use ultra wides. To me, it's about sitting in the car. I want to be immersed in it. And those little things add. I remember one of the first things that I put on my rig back in the days when I was building one was the wind simulator, which is the most stupid thing if you think about it. It's two PC fans that are blowing at you, which increase in RPM if you go faster and blow less when you go slower. But you wouldn't imagine how, if you haven't tried it, how much that immerses you. It just takes one of your senses and fools it into, I'm actually moving, which is all it takes sometimes. And having a lockout on a shifter and making it feel right, that is really what the Bash Pro is about. And it does it very well. The problem with this shifter is we've only just started producing it. So after we've done the testing with really hard testing, as in testing it to the point of breakage, if we can break it, we then decided, okay, let's start a small batch. And we did our first batch was, I think, 25 units, and that sold out like immediately. We had a lot of build-up demand because Martin was working on this for many years. That project was being followed by a lot of his fans and friends. So this was before we even met. So these people were just waiting for him to go, start releasing it, sell it, and call it a final. And so after a little bit of input from me, not very much, I'm not taking the credit here because I know Martin will see this. We improved it and made it shippable, and now it went out to the customers. And well, we've had zero unhappy people. Everyone really thinks it's incredible, and also a lot of people who had the other shifters in that price segment as a comparison said, well, this is a game changer. It's completely different. It's not just about the feel, but the added information you can get through our SimHub plugin in order to create the lockouts, in order to learn the shifting behavior. None of that, has been on the market before. It's completely new. And and there's a race.
I like it. I like the design. Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
I like the design. The design is simple, but remember me the old gears, the old shifters, on the old car. So I don't know, give me a nostalgic vibe. and I really
Yes,
I really like it. I'm really interesting and try it, because I think for the video that you guys show it, looks very fun. Looks that have an active engine and everything behind it, so looks really, really good. I will be very keen to try it.
Well, we'll see if we
beautiful.
can send you.
I might have to ask you.
We're working on the second batch now, so once we have enough,
okay,
we will then start pushing it out. We literally had one unit only that we gave out for review, and Race Beyond Matter, one of the YouTubers, had it, and he was waxing lyrical about it. He was very happy. So that's all we had, and everything else sold. So we're working on the second batch now. We're trying to do much more. But this is not a product that can be done in a factory. So a lot of this is custom made CNC cut steel, the assembly and the fine tuning of it, and then testing before we ship it out. We take that very seriously because it is a very high margin product, a high cost product, right? It's not cheap, but it's also not cheap to manufacture. It's very expensive compared to everything else we do. A lot of the shortcuts you can make in manufacturing, you can do a lot with 3D printing in this day and age. And I'm not just talking about PLA prints. We use ABS printing on resins and SLA. But certain things you need to make out of steel. There's only so much you can simulate with a printed or partially printed enclosure when it comes to feel and resonance and sound. And that's why, for example, if you compare the Lebois shifter, which has a lockout system, and I think it's a great DIY project. I think he's done a fantastic job considering what he set out to do, but you can't compare them. So you can hear the sound is already different, let alone the feel of it. So yes, functionally, it might be similar, but apart from that, it's worlds apart. And that's why we have to laser cut and CNC a lot of the parts for the Bash Pro.
That's good. And in terms of Trustmaster, I saw that on your website you are saying that it's coming soon. What you guys going to work with Trustmaster? Because I am a Trustmaster owner. So, like you said, before the COVID, I had a Logitech, and after I got offered a TVT, so the version with the belts, the most higher version for PlayStation, and I have everything on Trustmasters until now. So what are you going to do with Trustmaster?
So what we're working on now is Series 2. And it's not a secret because the original wheels were all Series 1 wheels, and so now we're doing Series 2. Series 2 will be a wheel that will look the same for all platforms. It'll function on Thrustmaster, it'll function on Logitech, we'll make it reverse compatible. So in other words, it'll work on G29s, but it will also work on the DD Pro. It will work on a Thrustmaster. It'll work on a Fanatec CSL. It's going to work literally everywhere. And the way we achieve this is by making the basic layout, the telemetry screen, everything that is in the wheel exactly the same. Just the insides, the electronics, since we specialize on that, that's different. And that's going to enable then to make it run on the different systems. Because to make, for example, a third-party wheel run on a DD-CSL, you need to make the DD-CSL think that it's connected to a Fanatec wheel. You can't just put on another wheel. So there's certain things you can do. None of this is top secret. These projects have been around on GitHub. If you look around in terms of code, how to reverse engineer certain things. That's how we reverse engineered the Logitech wheel, right? We have our own PCB in there. The quick release system that we developed has a replication of the PCB that's inside every Logitech wheel. And that allows the Logitech wheel and buttons and functions all to work, even when you disconnect the original PCB, because we have our PCB in the quick release. We have that on the website, so it shows there. So that's basically what we're going to do. And for Thrustmaster, it's going to be even easier. This is because Thrustmaster already always had an openness towards mods and PC connections. So it's going to be relatively easy. The only problem that we have at the moment is we're still working on reverse engineering the DD Pro. the Logitech DD Pro. If you disconnect the steering wheel because it has a quick release, your direct drive function is nil, gone. And so you need to, we need to basically sniff the protocol between the wheel and the wheelbase in order for us to be able to fool the wheelbase, the motor, that there is actually a wheel attached to it so that the force feedback works. That's the only thing we're struggling with at the moment. Then everything else is just a matter of adapting the quick release. So on Thrustmaster, there's already a quick release system, so we'll adapt ours to make that work there. For Logitech, we already developed it. For the DD Pro, we're working on it. All the others like Fanatec and so on is relatively easy because it's just your standard 70mm 6-hole pattern. So you can just plonk it on and it'll be easy. So yeah, that's basically it. We are skipping going the route of taking a, let's say, T150 or TS300 Thrustmaster, taking that apart, reassembling it, and then trying to emulate the buttons. Because as much as that works for the Logitech G29 and our Series 1, for me, this is a 3.5-year-old idea. I am well past that. I don't want to do this again, even though it's a different platform. I don't want to do any of that. So what we're going to do is just basically use the Thrustmaster quick release, take the original wheel off. That would exclude, I think, the 150. I don't think the 150 has a quick release, or does it? Do you know?
No, I think all them now have the old ones have the quick release that is a rotation, no? And after it's old by a screw. They have a screw, yes. And now the new one, the T818, have already a quick release button that you just take it and mount. But what I heard was they will make quick releases for you adapt to all the wheels, so you can adapt the wheel to mount it to the new quick release. So I don't know how they're doing it because Thrustmaster has been very slow in the process, and Logitech too, comparing with Moza. I think Moza is putting all the eggs on the basket. Even Fanatec has been very quiet, so let's see what's going to come now.
It's always a balance. So when Fanatec came out with the DD CSL, or even the DD, when they came out with their first, I think the DD1 or what it was called, it's a very delicate and very difficult thing to do. On the one hand, they've developed an ecosystem. Existing wheels, existing pedals. And that ecosystem was never meant for direct drive wheels, meaning it wasn't meant for that much torque. And at the same time, the reason why you bought Fanatec to begin with is because of the Fanatec ecosystem. So you can change to the McLaren wheel, you can change to the Rally wheel, you can change to their F1 wheel. And then they come out with a direct drive motor, which with that wheel is only going to work if you put an adapter in between. You can't use it directly. So what happened was, that was famously, there was a video by one of the old school YouTube race reviewers called Barry's Garage. Everyone knows him probably. He made a video showing how you take the DD from the Fanatec and then you put on their adapter and then you use this. And by the end, you between the motor itself and the wheel, from this, you grow to this with 6 different adapters in between. And of course, the whole thing just flexes like a soft sausage. And then it's terrible. The problem is you have this ecosystem, and I'm not now pooping all over Fanatec. It's a very difficult thing to make that decision to go, either we say, you cannot use any of our existing ecosystem on this new direct drive system. You have to buy a new this and this and this. Or you go, let's compromise. We'll make it compatible with an adapter. We know it's not going to be really great, but at least we can still sell it together as part of the ecosystem. It's a very difficult choice to make. And Thrustmaster is in the same boat. They have a plastic quick release system with a screw, and they have to get away from this because this isn't going to work for a stronger motor. It's just going to cause trouble.
You can always support the channel clicking on the like button, and subscribe to the channel. Subscribe to the channel is helping us the channel to engage a little bit more. 99.5% of the people that see our channel are not subscribers, so please guys subscribe, and of course comment what you think about a note from MVH Studio and what you would like them to bring to us on the future. And of course, if you listen us, not see us, listen us on the Spotify and Apple Podcasts, hit the 5 stars ranking please, and of course keep engaged there and explain what you like and what you don't like to keep us bringing more content to you. And of course join us our Patreon that you know we always share with games beat cancer. But let's go back to Mark.
This is, I know there's a lot of armchair engineers out there who will say, "Oh, it's so easy. Why aren't they doing?" Don't be wrong. Don't misunderstand what you see and what actually is happening behind the scenes. There's a difference. It's quite a difficult thing to produce something in the large numbers that Logitech or Thrustmaster produce. Yeah. We're a tiny company. We produce, 1,000 wheels a month. What is that? That's not even a drop of water on the hot stone called Logitech. They produce millions. And in order to produce something in those quantities, changing just a single part, doesn't matter how trivial that part is quite difficult. Mm-hmm. You have to sort out the supply chain. You have to do the engineering behind it. You have to retool some machines for it, processes for assembly, quality control, and then shipping. A lot of that stuff is not, in anyone's calculation when they go, "Oh, you just have to change this little bit here." That's very difficult to do. I am pretty sure they know exactly at Thrustmaster what they need to do to make it better. That's not the issue. It's more the logistics behind it, the cost involved to do those changes. And while you as an end user will say, "Well, I only need this part. How much could that possibly cost versus the same part in plastic?" As an example, that's not how the math works. This is why a lot of people don't see it. This is also why scaling up to a larger amount of output is very difficult if you don't sit on millions of financing, right? For example, for us, if I could, I'd be producing Bash Pros by the thousands every month. It's not possible. It's just the outlay, the financial outlay is massive. And people don't see that. So that's why I think they know they will fix it. It will take time. It will also take time for marketing reasons. As I explained, Fanatec could have said, "Here's the DD Pro. It's fantastic, but none of our previous wheels will work. You need to buy this new wheel." And if they did that, then the total, the entry point would not have been $499, which they couldn't do anyway, as they couldn't deliver for ages. It would have been $899 or something along those lines, because you have to pay for the wheel as well. And then you're tied to that one wheel. You don't have the ecosystem to fall back on, because not everybody wants a round wheel. I mean, I know that's how my business started. I didn't like a round wheel. I wanted an open wheel. So it's all a bit more complex than some people think and see. But I have, I've seen what's coming, and I can tell you, for a lot of manufacturers, this is it's a very strong push now into sim racing, and that means there's a lot of money behind it. There's a lot of people starting the hobby, and I'm pretty sure that all those who used to be in the budget segment, like Thrustmaster, Logitech, now are going to start filling that middle segment all the way up to the place of SimuCube and all the other crazy costly entry points, because there's more and more people racing. There's a Gran Turismo movie coming this summer.
It's a big evolution on the sim racing, no?
Exactly. If you told me 3 years ago there's going to be a Gran Turismo movie as a blockbuster, if you told me 3 years ago that Formula One will be a big thing in America, this is the land of NASCAR, I would have said to you, "Come on, man, what are you smoking?"
No, it is, because the last Grand Prix that I went was Silverstone in 2019, and was the highest Grand Prix ever on UK, and was 200,000 views. and now he have 450 or 420,000 views. so in a space of 4 years, 5 years, you expand almost for the double. So it's crazy just to think on that.
Massive.
On that day, it was already packed, and I imagine now how gonna be with these days completely full. So it's crazy how we don't understand the how F1 popularity raised so much just by a good TV show. When Netflix coming on the right time because came a little bit before the COVID, but because during the COVID they was keeping the releasing, I think was what bring more Formula One to what is, and even sim racing. Sure. I think if was no COVID, if was no COVID,
there's more. Yeah, there's. Liberty Media is an American company that bought the rights to broadcast F1, right? And that is actually the big push, the financial push. Netflix was on top, of course, a massive hit. So those things together made it such a big thing in the US. And that's why if you go and watch an F1 race now, there's one in Miami, there's one in Texas, and so on. All of these American superstars are suddenly interested in it, and when they walk the grid, there's musicians there and movie stars, and it's like, oh, okay, that wasn't there 4 or 5 years ago.
No.
You wouldn't see
No.
Tom Cruise at the F1 race, and now it's like, yeah, of course, man.
Is popularity. But let's go back to the sim racing. You think you see that sim racing will be the future of motorsport, on your opinion?
No, that's a good question. It's hard to say. The thing is, it depends very much on how it's portrayed, how it's seen in the media, to keep it alive and keep it working. I'm now in my, I'm going to be 50 soon. So to me, certain cars that are older are much more interesting. I enjoy that much more. I live 15 minutes from Goodwood. So obviously I go to, Goodwood Revival and Festival of Speed, and I enjoy seeing the older race cars. To me, the most beautiful cars ever built are the older cars from the 60s, 70s. And when it comes to Formula One, I like the MP4 from McLaren more than any of the modern cars, But I admire at the same time the new technologies. I see there's a place for them. For example, electric drivetrains are, the future for literally every car except for race cars, I think. To me, there's nothing sounds nicer than a 1990s F1 motor zooming by. I'm talking pre-hybrid era. That is just
or even the turbo era. You're talking about the 80s. Yes. I think the turbo era is crazy. Just thinking that they have an engine just developed just for qualify, giving 1,200 horsepower or 1,500 like the Benetton have. It's crazy. It's crazy just to think about that.
Exactly. Yeah, those are that's what makes me go, oh man, this is real racing. This is what I love. Now, we're looking at current racing and how racing has evolved. It's still a dangerous sport. It's still, cutting edge, whether they use hybrids, whether they will be using electrics. But is that going to stay? Or is sim racing going to take, a more important place? I think there will always be a symbiosis for a long time to come. At some point,
I agree.
There's a famous quote by a fellow Austrian, Niki Lauda, when he decided to retire from Formula One the first time. He decided to retire. Said, you know what? I think he told it to his team chef. He got out of the car in the middle of a practice session, if I remember correctly. He said, I'm tired of going around in circles. And he just walked away, He said, that's it. Bye-bye Formula One. He started off in airline and then came back again to Formula One later again. And then never left it because obviously he then worked for Mercedes in the management and so on. So there might be a time where going around in circles is not as interesting to the public anymore. But what I think will always stay is the fascination with racing and competing. Competition is something that we have in our blood. And whether that will be simulated or whether that will be an actual track, hard to say. I don't know. I think there will always be a need for the real thing because we will always want to look back at the times when it was different. There's a fascination with culture history, and that comes in racing as well. There's a reason why Silverstone as an F1 race is so big. It's because where F1 started. And this kind of culture, this kind of inbred want to be competing on a track, I mean, that is so prevalent here in the UK more than anywhere else. I think that doesn't disappear when you go sim racing either. I think there is definitely that fascination is still going to be there, even when sim racing takes over and becomes, let's say, more popular, not necessarily more widely seen or watched. Because it's one thing to be racing in a simulator. It's very different when you're actually in a car. And if you've done any laps around a racetrack in whatever it was, and I've done a few, I can tell you that it's a completely different feeling. No matter how good your simulation is, that's just different. And you might be racing a go-kart,
Yeah, it's something that I always fascinated is when more with the young generation, because I'm 34. So it's when they are speaking and they go, oh, but you are driving wrong. You driving the car like this, or the car go the weight balance, but they never drive an actual car. They never sit down. But I like, as a sim racer, I like to jump and drive their old cars. I don't know, it's something there nostalgic. Yes. If you jump on a dirty rally and you drive R5, the new category, or the new category from the WRC, they are fast, but they are easy to drive. If you go and you jump on a Group B or even on 1600s or on the 80s, man, they are so fun. They are so hard to drive. You need to turning much more, you need to brake completely different, heel toe, and I love that. I'm going to say I'm a sucker for the nostalgia, for that immersion on the old times. I don't know. It's my personal way.
I think the reason you like it is also because your emphasis is not so much on the competition part. Your emphasis is on the immersion. And if you want to be immersed, you want to have more feedback. Making it more difficult sounds really counterproductive. As an example, direct drive motors are being promoted by how strong they are, how big the torque is. The real drivers, or most people I know, and not including me, have their direct drive motor set to something like 7 or 8 Newton meters. Even if the direct drive motor can do 15 or 20 Newton meters, which is enough to break your thumbs if you're unlucky. Most people don't do that. They put it down lower. Why? Because you don't really want to be working hard when you're in a race if you're trying to be competitive. However, if you want realism, if it isn't about winning a race, if you're not there to, rank high and then go into whatever further competition on iRacing, you dial all this down. And this is an example of something else I did in my previous life. Is I was playing a lot of Quake, first-person shooter. For most people, don't know what that is. And when Quake came out,
I remember because I come from that time.
Well, there you go. Competitive Quake players, they would remove every detail in the graphics. You'd be just looking at blocks. All the skins were gone. It was just straight up geometry you're working with in order to be faster, more efficient, precise on the railgun, in order to not get distracted by anything. So you remove all the realism, all the good-looking stuff to become extremely good at the game. But that doesn't make the game fun for most of the people who want the realism, the graphics. I'm a VR racer. I want to see the car, and I want to feel the car, which is why the Bash Pro is such a wonderful device. It makes me feel the car and just immerse me even more. And that's why we want an open wheel, not a round wheel when you're racing in an F1 car. It feels right. But that doesn't necessarily, translate into performance. So I think the nostalgia is very much tied to that. And to most people, I think it's more into that direction, the realism, the immersion, and less into the, I'm going to be, one of the top 10 sim racers in the world. Because let's face it, there's not many who are that good.
And I think the young generation gonna adapt faster. I think young generation, they jump on a sim and they adapt very fast because they can process more that feelings regardless us, because we already drive cars. For example, if I jump now on playing Gran Turismo 1, I'm going to be very bad because I need to adapt myself again how was to drive the cars on that mode, because I was driving completely different. So everything is a different process. And I think the new generation are much faster to adapt to anything than us. It's an evolution, like we talk about. It's an evolution. So they go jump on the sim, and I see kids with 10 years old making times faster already than semi-professionals and even some professionals, because they adapt, they interpret everything so quickly. Then us that take a little bit more time is what it is. We cannot do nothing. And to finish,
but it's also not something you want. You get all and be like happy with, realism. I'm not in for the competition. A little bit of fun with your friends, and then okay, I'll be second or third or 10th. Doesn't matter. Yeah, I know where you're coming from.
I share the same thing. So to finish the podcast, I always make some quickly fire questions. It's gonna be easy ones, and let's start it. Favorite hardware?
Oh, that's a good question.
Taking out the MVH Studio ones.
Yes, excluding our own products, I would say favorite piece of hardware in sim racing, that is, yeah?
Yeah.
The SFX 100 motion rig that was developed by a couple of Germans, which I built early on, and I think it is over-engineered beyond any reason, and it's fantastic. So yeah.
All right. That would be my favorite. If you have to choose a favorite hardware, favorite game, which one would be?
Gran Turismo.
Gran Turismo? Okay. And if you have to choose a favorite car, which car is your sim racing car to go?
Porsche GT3.
Any type of year, any type of particularly develop any model, or just the global?
GT3, pretty much every variant. Yeah,
okay, any
you can tune it to whatever you want. Yeah, that's definitely my car. Yeah.
And if you have to choose a real car to try on your real life, which one you would prefer?
I've tried a few. As I said, I live near good. You can try all crazy stuff. I think the one thing I'd like to try is probably, I haven't had the opportunity yet, but I would really like to try a Cobra AC fully properly tuned, as in not limited, because I was able to try one and it was limited to a certain power. I want that wild, uncontrollable of that AC doing this when you hit the throttle when you come out of a turn. I think that would be one I'd like to try and I haven't tried yet. Yeah, that would be on my list.
Interesting. But the version from the 60s or? Exactly.
Yes,
but the version of the 6, okay, the version from the 60s, okay. Because a lot of the time now is a lot of replicas and they not simulate the same way. I think I agree with you. I think the child from the 60s is
once, and in Cape Town there's a couple of companies that do replica rental, and they look fantastic, but it's
not the same. Okay.
I think you can put on a list of GT40. That would also be a nice one. Yeah, maybe they're close.
Anyway, have the same engineer behind it, because even if he's a 4, was a Shelby that was there, developed everything. So I would say the GT4 is one of probably the most iconic cars that I never drive one, but I saw, and the sound, everything around it is is a beast. Just thinking they create that thing just to beat Ferrari, just for a ego. It's quite funny as a car for ego. Come and it's such iconic. It's a real good story. Thanks for everything, Mark. For my part, is a goodbye. I hope we can talk soon. I hope we can do a lot of things together. And I live near, so anything you guys need it for my part, just give a shout. I'm going to be always available.
You're welcome to come visit anytime. We've only just managed. We're still. I don't know if you can hear the hammering and drilling in the background, but we're still expanding the place. But yeah, you're more than welcome to come by and see how it's going on. You won't see my other half of engineers in Budapest unless you want to travel down there. But we're close, so anytime.
And any plans for going to the expo this year? For the Simracing Expo in Germany?
I can't. I really don't have the time. Look, I didn't shave in days. That's because I work so much. It's really...
Don't worry.
I'd love to. I'll be watching all the YouTubers because they're very good. They give you a good idea what's going on. I would love to try the SimiCube pedal like everyone else. But apart from that, no, I don't have the time. Not this year. Next year. I'm pretty sure next year I'll be able to, and I will go. We have considered possibly being also on those expos with our products, but I'm not saying anything yet.
All right. Thank you so much for everything.
Thank you, Hugo. It's been a pleasure.
I just close.
Next week, we're going to go back to the normal program, as you know, talking about Simracing news and what is happening on the world of Simracing. The expo is coming, so a lot of things to talk. And of course, WRC23 already released the full list of cars, so keep an eye because we're going to talk about the cars and a little bit more. Guys, see you next episode.